You're listening to the Soul Career Podcast, the podcast that brings you stories from people who've taken a risk to discover careers that fill them with purpose and make them come alive. I'm your host, Lysandra Rickards, and I lead Soul Career, a coaching company that helps executives, professionals, and entrepreneurs to find and live their life's work and to lead authentically. So if you love this episode, let us know. Send us a message on Instagram at Soul Career. Now for the episode. Thanks for joining us at Soul Career. I'm Lysandra Rickards, and today I'm joined by my really good friend, Angella Rainford. Angela is the developer of one of the largest solar energy farms in the Caribbean, as well as a founder of a solar leasing / distributed power company. So how did this power woman get to where she is today? So thanks for joining us, Angela.
Great. Thank you very much for having me.
So I wanted to start with the solar farm that you have out in Westmoreland at Paradise Park. How did that project come into being?
So to be honest, it was completely a little bit by accident, and then definitely with a lot of additional help. So I left banking, having wanted to be an entrepreneur for a very long time. And there kind of comes a point where you basically look in the mirror and you're either a banker or you're an entrepreneur. And then you have to make that leap of faith. And so I left, I guess, in 2011 and basically started looking for investment opportunities. I am from the Caribbean, and I've always had an interest primarily in developing country markets. So whether it's Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa, and so started looking at opportunities here in Jamaica. And originally I was looking at agriculture because that's where my dad was in terms of sectors. But the first project I worked on didn't quite work out. Right. And I got a phone call from an older gentleman. And when I say older, he's 93 or over 90. And he basically said, look, I got to know you through look at your agriculture project. Energy is changing in Jamaica. It's changing in the Caribbean. So why don't you take a look at it? And I was frustrated at that point and told him, no, you're crazy. I'm going elsewhere. I'm going to do something else.
Why were you frustrated?
Because the first project took a very long time. There's a lot of bureaucracy that was involved. It was a potentially a government privatization, which it actually in the end didn't happen for after 4 or 5 years. Right. From when they announced the idea of doing it. And when you're used to working in an investment banking kind of climate where things move very quickly, 4 or 5 years is not really an option in the outset. And so that's part of the reason why I got really frustrated. But in the long run, through that frustration, actually created the opportunity for the Positive Project, which we ended up developing and commissioning last year. And so I owe a lot to Mr. Phipps, who was a gentleman who called me and encouraged me to look at the energy sector. Right. So that's a bit of a story as to how I fell into it rather than necessarily having a specific plan at that point in time.
Right. So you were an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, and I know you were in principal investing at Goldman.
Yes.
Which is investing Goldman's own money into projects. That is like the cream of the crop, the tip of the top. And you decided at that point to take a big risk and launch out on your own. Why did you decide that? What made you take that leap? Because it's so hard for so many people earning big 6-figure salaries to now jump out to no salary. How did you do it?
I think it's a little bit of madness. I think you have to have a little bit of that madness side because it's a leap of faith, right? So you have to try not to think of it too much, but follow your gut to some extent and decide, I just need to make that jump. But to be honest, when I walked in to hand in my resignation letter, I was shaking. Yeah. The senior partner didn't even look at the letter in the end. He's like, don't worry, just don't tell anyone on the floor. But also he tried to counteroffer. So he said, do you want me to counteroffer to get you to stay? And makes it even more challenging because once you've made that decision that you want to leave and then to have someone else say, you still don't have to leave, let's find a way to keep you here. And then I remember saying, no, don't counteroffer. I really have made this decision for myself. Why do you make that decision at that point in time? I think it depends on how you want to write your story and what you view that to be. And I always, even in college, I ran a company. I enjoyed the experience. And for me, Goldman was always a stepping stone. And I had reached a point in my career where I knew enough to give me confidence that I had built a skill set that I didn't have before, which would be helpful in my next journey. But also I was in a position where I had a bit of runway. I probably needed more runway than I expected, but I had a bit of runway to be able to be out there without necessarily having an income at that point in time.
Right, because you had a bit of savings.
Yes.
Okay.
So savings, and I had paid off, I was very fortunate that I paid off a lot of my business school debt.
Right.
My student loans.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So at this point, you had a why in your head. You wanted to leave a legacy. You wanted to build something.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
Probably it's a little bit innate, but to be honest, a lot from my dad.
Yeah.
My dad, he was a businessman. He was self-made. And it was not until he passed away that I actually realized how much of the journey he had been on, because he never discussed it with us. I mean, he mentioned little bits and snippets of his childhood, but after he passed away, his sister took us to where they grew up and where they were born. And he was poor.
Yeah.
I mean, he grew up really poor. A small shack, as we call it in Jamaica, with, at the time, I think they lost one sibling, but it was up to 7 people living in effectively what we would view as a 1-bedroom, and you just try to think of how did he go from there to giving me the opportunities that I had to be able to go to, a Harvard or something like that. And so that was very inspiring for me to want to better myself. And even as a child, I always believed in maximizing your potential. You never know what your full potential is, but the duty that we have to ourselves, and I think to greater society, is just maximize whatever that may be and do the best that you can.
So your dad, Henry Rainford, ended up founding a company that was listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Yes.
In agriculture. And
Yes.
he became a big beacon of business in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And that's where you got your entrepreneurial energy from.
Exactly. And even, just seeing him on the weekends, he would take us to go view properties as part of his company. We were bored because we actually want to just stay in Kingston, enjoy ourselves, go shopping, But it was that discipline, that duty, and that excitement about it, and that creativity where you're of ownership. I think ownership for me became super important because I saw that through my dad. And his story, again, just bumping back to that, he studied accounting. So he didn't have a chance to go to high school. He went to high school, but he didn't go to university. And he grew up in Soleco, which, as you know, is a very rural part of Jamaica. And at that time, he basically studied accounting by correspondence. So we're doing emails right now, you're doing Open University, but this is basically literally writing letters back and forth to London. Yeah. And then from there, he became an accountant for a company that he was supposed to undertake. I mean, the company was practically bankrupt. And he spotted an opportunity that actually this company is not bankrupt. And so he started becoming more managerial, turning it around, and buying up shares. So also investing, which I think is a super important part of entrepreneurship. That it's not just a transactional thing, but also view it as an investment, both in yourself and in your business. And he did that, and before you knew it, he became the largest shareholder. And just to put into context, this is Jamaica in kind of the 60s, where there was a lot of change. Jamaica didn't even exist. Yeah. People always tend to forget Jamaica wasn't even a country at that turn of that decade. And he walked into the boardroom one day, and the guys were like, wow, something extraordinary has happened today. We have a man of color who's now the chairman of the board.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You decided to branch out, to build your own business. You looked at an agriculture project, which I happen to know it's the cocoa project.
You do research.
I just remember because this was 2011 when I just met you, right? And you were looking at buying up the cocoa lands from the government and doing something with it. But it took really long. You got frustrated as things happen. When diaspora wants to invest in Jamaica, we have to move fast. Otherwise, we'll lose the opportunity, right? And so you got frustrated with Jamaica. You were like, I'm going to look in Africa. I'm going to look somewhere else.
I went to Senegal. I was literally sitting in a cafe in Senegal when Mr. Phipps, the Jamaican gentleman, called me. And I told him, oh, you're crazy, old man. He's like, no, come back home. Come back. We don't want to lose you yet.
Right. Yeah. So we had an amazing, brilliant Jamaican woman living in London, wanting to do something in Jamaica, got frustrated, but found another opportunity, which was the government again putting out an RFP for a solar energy plant farm.
Exactly. So basically that was 2011, 2012. 2012 is when the government made a change in regulation, which effectively allowed independent developers to develop renewable projects without having a government partnership. And so I embarked upon that. I hadn't done anything in energy before. I worked on maybe 1 or 2 deals at Goldman, but that was very academic in terms of just doing the modeling and things like that. So this was very much a learning experience, and realized that there were certain building blocks that I didn't necessarily have myself. But I think as being part of being an entrepreneur, it's all about being resourceful, right? Creating something out of nothing and figuring out who are the right partners or groups that you want to partner with to be able to create something. So this in 2012, 2013, I partnered with a French company called NeoN, and we embarked on the journey of developing the project. Traveling around, I secured the lands for the project, built the relationships. A lot of the community engagement started there, and even today, it's to this day that's super important because that drives a lot of what we do. And then we bid, and then in 2013. Unfortunately, we didn't win.
So I don't think you're telling this story properly.
All right, tell me more.
Because you went to all these different sites in Jamaica to find land, trudging around in your boots.
And we lost some of them.
Right.
The day before the CEO from Paris. So I basically went back to Europe to try and find investors. And I had this meeting in Paris. It went really well, and well with the CEO. There were other people in the room who are like, "Why are we looking at this thing in Jamaica? This is so random of a project." But he liked it, and so he basically decided, I'm coming with an engineer to go and take a look. And the day before he arrived, I had 3 sites which I had secured, or in principle had an agreement with the landowner that they were interested. One guy called me up saying I've given it to somebody else. Another guy said he changed his mind about being in energy, even though a few years later he was trying to invest in energy. And then the third one was still there, but that was the only thing that we had left. And so I had this moment where I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy is flying in from Paris. His engineer tropes across from Australia, and I don't have anything to show them.
Yeah, because you had lost all the sites.
I lost all the sites. And again, just bring up my dad again, because he was very influential. And he would come with me occasionally to some of these things. He said, look, don't worry about it. These gentlemen are coming to see what you can do, not necessarily what you have. Not what you have right now, but what you could have. And what you need to show them is that you can open up the country to them. And that's what I did.
So if I'm to take a lesson from your story to this point, it's that when you leave your 9-to-5 to embark on your sole career as an entrepreneur, the first thing you have to do is think about your network and the resources you have to pull your vision together.
Absolutely.
And you had an incredible network from your time as a banker in London, and your network stretched into Paris and Germany and Australia, and you were able to pull together a group of people who will now look at this RFP from the government as an investment opportunity.
No, you're absolutely right. But it's a combination of having the network, but you have to work the network. Because sometimes people may have something, but unless you cultivate it and you try, it's not always going to be successful. Again, just coming back to the French company I met, to put into context, how did that happen? So basically, when I started, I decided, let me go to Goldman and see if some of my ex-MDs, if they would back me. And I got a bunch of no's, which was really disappointing at that period of time. And I was waiting in the lobby with an engineering guy I was working with. And basically, I was going to meet someone else. And one of the French MDs who I worked with, he came down the escalator and he's like, Angella, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, I'm actually here to meet another MD, not you. And he said, what? You're not here to meet me? Call Sandrine, who's my assistant, who actually now is working with me, and tell her to set up a meeting for us, which I did. And so it was that moment in time, if you think about it, if I were not sitting at the lobby, at that point in time, when he came down the escalator and invite me to come and meet with him, he would not have been able to put me in touch with the owner of NeoN, who in the end backed me. And so that's what I mean about working that network. Just try, go out there. There may be some yeses or nos, but it's all about trying to use whatever resources you have.
Amazing. So now you've gone all over the world. You've pulled together financial backers. You've pulled together people who could actually manufacture, but it's develop.
Yes.
Right? The panels and the engineers and so on. And you put together this bid. And I remember you working on this bid day and night until crazy hours in the morning. Blood, sweat, and tears.
It's a 24/7 role when you're an entrepreneur.
And this was in 2012, and you submitted this bid, and you had this great pricing, everything, and then you lost it.
Oh my God.
You didn't win the bid.
And it still feels bad. It still breaks. I remember it was October, and just to put into context at that point in time. So unfortunately, my marriage, being an entrepreneur, put a lot of strain on my marriage. So around the bid and that was announced in October. Around September, my marriage started to fall apart. And neither party, there's never a sole party to blame. There's always a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm. I blame him.
You're funny, but okay. But it just wasn't. It just didn't work, and so I moved out of our marital home around that time, and I didn't have anywhere to go. I'd already gone through my savings. Fortunately, I didn't have the debt, which again I was really happy I got rid of that. But I didn't, I had very minimal savings, and I was living in London, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world. So a good girlfriend of mine, she opened up her home to me. Again, was just getting married to her husband. And I was basically the girlfriend about to get divorced, sleeping on the couch in London. And even, so in October, we got the announcement. I was actually in their flat and we had lost. And I was thinking, wow, okay, we didn't win the project. So all of that sacrifice, you really start to test whether it made sense. And then obviously, my marriage had failed. I basically, heard this. I had bad news on both fronts, professional and personal side. They were both effectively failing at the same time. And when you've worked so hard and you've achieved, at that point in time, my CV looked great. And then I almost hit the self-destruct button by coming off that tried and tested path. And then on top of that, not only was my marriage failing, which, for my family especially, it's a big deal because no one in my family had been, immediate family, core family had been divorced. My parents were married in the end for almost 50 years. And then obviously on the professional side, that wasn't going too well either. So I felt very low. I mean, it's very deep, dark feelings that you start to go through and you start to have self-doubt.
Yeah, and you were on your friend's couch.
Yeah.
Living on your friend's couch. Coming from principal investing at Goldman Sachs,
oh my God, Lysandra,
to living on your friend's couch with no money, no savings.
So that was October, and then Christmas started coming around, and my dad was like, "Are you coming home for Christmas?" And I kid you not, I had so little money left in my account. It's like, no, I think I'm going to stay in London this year. You're going to stay in London? You're not coming home for Christmas? Yeah, no, I'm fine. It's, I have stuff to do over here, and the reality was that I didn't really have the money to buy that ticket to go home. Yeah. And I've never been at that stage. And so, again, just not to rattle off the CV, but to put into perspective when you think you have a lot, but actually you're at that point and you have very little, to have 2 Harvard degrees, a Cambridge degree, to have worked at one of the most prestigious firms in the world, and to be living on a friend's couch in my 30s, with not enough money to fly back to Jamaica. I was like, wow, what have I done wrong?
So I want to pause on this point because I'm at the point now where I'm leaving this fantastic job, or I have left it already.
Right.
9 to 5, CEO of the Branson Center, amazing job, to launch this venture that I've had in my mind for so long that is going to be my legacy that I want to leave in the world. And I am scared to death of going through the valleys that you went through, blowing all my savings, ending up on my friend's couch at 35 with no home, no money, and no man, and no job, and no business.
Right.
So how did you dig yourself out of that hole?
So you dig out of it by remembering that even when you don't have those external things, you still have yourself, right? You have that internal factor. You still have your education. You still have your skills. Actually, being at that point in time in that valley, you now have that experience of failure. Yeah. And there's a lot that you can learn from it.
I failed already, I don't need no more failures. That wasn't a failure for me, but continue.
And then the other thing is what are you really afraid of? And I think maybe to your earlier question about that decision point of leaving a place like Goldman, where you're very comfortable.
Yeah.
For me, my bigger fear was to be on my deathbed, 70, 80, hopefully 90. I mean, wishful thinking. And thinking, wow, life went by so quickly and I didn't do what I wanted to do. Or I didn't even at least try. The not trying for me is more scary than the failure.
Yes, that is what I keep in my head that keeps me going forward.
And so what I would encourage you and any of your listeners to think about is just remember that. Remember what that fear would be like. Because even if you fail, let's put it this way, I failed, right? and I had to dig myself back up, rebuild everything. I had to, at that point, go find a job, because now I had basically I'd run out of my savings, right? I have no more runway to go do another startup. So I had to go find another job, which I did, because remember what we have internally. I already had a good background, educational background. You need good friends as well to kind of keep you going. And then just remember that if you were at 70, 80, what can you change at that point? You can't change at that point. If you fail and you're in your 30s, you can still like revamp, recreate, and at least know that you tried and be proud of the fact that you tried.
Right.
Yeah.
So I remember you got a job. You were a consultant at an investment firm that invested in Africa.
Yes.
A small shop run by African guys who used to be in banking.
Awesome.
That were your friends.
Yes.
So they gave you a job. They're like, okay, we'll give you a job. And
feel sorry for me. No, but that was really great experience. And the other thing is, so when I left, going from a structured environment to being an entrepreneur was hard, because I, looked at the computer and like, make money. Computer, just make money. Tell me what to do. Because when you're in a job, people tell you what to do. You get your paycheck unless you get fired, but it's pretty much structure, right? This is the agreement. The reverse is even harder, I will say, just to prep you in the event. The reverse is harder, because at that point, now I'm used to being my own boss. I'm used to being unstructured. And also that confirmation that, okay, it didn't quite work out. It was very challenging. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. And actually, having been an entrepreneur who even fails, it made me a better professional when I went back. Okay. And that's part of the reason why they hired me, is because not only did I have the experience I did before leaving Goldman, but being a developer, when I met with our potential investees, so companies, the owners of these companies, they treated me a little bit differently, knowing that I had at least tried that journey which they had been on. Right. And it's kind of a badge of honor, or like little stripes, to know, wow, even whether it works out or not, you've been one of us, you've tried.
So here you were working for this company in London, but looking at African deals, and you were actually looking at energy deals in Africa. Yes. And you heard that the government, the company or the consortium that they chose for the bid that you had worked on, that consortium fell apart. Okay. And they were reopening the bid.
So basically what happened there, so they awarded part of the contracts. They awarded 3 of them. For all of the intermittent power that was bid. For the firm power, you're right, they couldn't find anything viable for firm power, so they went back out and reissued the tender. And so, yes, I was working a proper private equity job, basically, 90 to 100 hours, mainly in Africa, and my investors called me up to say, hey, it's come back, we want to work on this again. They changed the terms of the deal at that point, but it was fine. They gave me different options in terms of how we could structure it. And I decided, you know what, let's go again.
But that decision was very hard for you, because this was the thing that you failed at. And you were like, am I really going to go after this again when I failed already going after it? Yeah. But in the end, you decided to move forward.
Absolutely. And the way in which I mitigated this time around, because I hadn't had sufficient time to rebuild my savings, because I was an advisor for the funds and not an employee. They gave me permission. They're like, look, you can do whatever you want in your free time, but whenever you come here, you need to do what we need you to do. So I worked 2 jobs. Right. And I worked 3 time zones.
Yes. And you were flying back and forth. I don't know how you do it with the energy that's required to travel to all these places on the schedule that you were on.
You need a bit of madness. Honestly, you've met more entrepreneurs than I have. But the ones who I have met, there has to be something off. I don't know what exactly that thing is, but you know what I mean, right? You're laughing because it's true. There has to be something. You can't be, because otherwise if you're totally down the fairway, and there's nothing wrong with being down the fairway, by the way. I just want to say not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. Because if we were all entrepreneurs, who would help the entrepreneurs building businesses, right? So you need that crazy person with the vision and the energy to make it happen, and the risk appetite as well, which is super important. But you also need the soldiers and the generals and the rest of the army to put it together. But
so you put in the tender for the second time, and this time you won.
Yeah, I remember I was waiting up. Actually, a girlfriend came over to keep my company, and that day I had a very interesting conversation with a mentor of mine who ended up helping me. And it was actually almost heartbreaking because he looked at me and he said, Angela, I think you made a mistake. I was like, what? You know, that decision point about, it's like, well, you were on this right blue chip path and you've come off and it's no longer blue chip. And I was like, whoa, why? And I defended myself. I said, even though I respect him and I respected that he has his own opinion, I said, look, life is not about living a blue chip path.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Life is about living your own story. And for me, and this is just my personal opinion, the more interesting stories tend to be the ones that are off that beaten path, because you can't be extraordinary by being ordinary.
I completely agree with you. And the people that you're surrounded by when you go to Harvard undergrad, Harvard Business School,
right.
Cambridge, the people you're surrounded by, because we're all funneled on the path,
yes.
the blue chip path,
yes.
when you veer off of it, you get this echo chamber of you're wrong, you've made a mistake, you're crazy.
Exactly.
And you question yourself. Yes. And if you don't put yourself in places surrounded by entrepreneurs and visionaries who right. jumped and took a big risk to do something different, right. then you might go back into the default. And you have to prevent yourself from going back to default. And
default is easy, right? Yeah. Actually, coming off that path
yes.
is the more difficult decision
yes.
to make.
Right.
More risky decision.
So thankfully, this time it paid off. Yes. I don't know what would have happened if you failed again. You
just
would have
continue
gone again.
Going. Yeah, I probably would have gone again. And that's also a thing about most successful entrepreneurs. They have failed many times.
Yeah.
You may not know or see the failure, but because people tend to focus on the success and hold it as a beacon. But chances are they've been through 2-3 different failures. And I'm not going to get the numbers completely right, but there's an interesting factoid or statistic that says that 95% of the sales are made after 95% of the calls or something like that. But only 5% of the people actually make that call after 95%.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that follows or if
right.
you... Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me when I'm trying to now get clients and generate sales in my own business. Right? You have to build that momentum and get to that point where now it becomes a system.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, I'm going to do a call out to my female entrepreneurs. Women tend to not have as many opportunities in terms of that rejection as men do when they're growing up. Now, it's obviously things are changing. Everything's very fluid. But when I was growing up, females tended to not be the ones to ask someone, do you want to go out?
Yeah.
Right? And just something as simple as that,
just
for a guy to have to do that and have someone say no.
Yeah.
No. That is a training process when they're really young. That works really well when you do want to do something off the beaten path.
Right.
Because then you're used to hearing no and you just say, okay, they said no, but I'll try again.
Keep going.
Just keep going.
So women, we need to take more risks. We need to ask for what we want, say what we want. And if it's a no, it's fine. Keep it moving, right?
Absolutely.
So you won the bid and fast forward to last year, the solar plant farm has been developed and it's massive.
It's huge. Yeah, it is very big.
I saw a video and it's just miles and miles of solar panels out in West Midland.
So it's 150 acres. It's the largest in the English-speaking Caribbean. It's one of the largest in the entire region. And it's the cheapest source of power for Jamaica, which is super cool.
So when are our light bills going to go down?
I know. Well, it should be an element towards it, but we're only meeting probably about 5% of the overall electricity needs. What I would like to see is more.
Yeah.
And more also filtered through the system so that we can bring down the electricity bills because they shouldn't be this high in this market.
So you, having never developed a solar plant in your life...
See what I mean about madness?
Yes. Developed the largest solar plant in Jamaica, one of the largest in the Caribbean, 150 acres of solar panels.
It was a $65 million investment, US in Jamaica.
And how did you, not having that experience, how did you do it?
So it's funny, I get that question all the time. And I think part of it is because it's totally against the odds, right? Someone who's never done it before actually succeeding. And to be fair, it questions a lot of the other developers who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And I can see that. I'd be annoyed too. This girl racks up who's never done it before. And I've been here for 20, 30 years and I haven't done that.
Yeah.
Why? How could that be? And I think what a number of people tend to underestimate is the fact that energy development is finance. It's just... It's just dressed up in a different coat. It's like it's a rat and a squirrel. The squirrel just has a more fancy fur coat, but they're pretty much they're rodents. And
great metaphor.
But effectively, when you strip it back, and this is what happened the year before we finished building the plants, because we were doing the signing, and it was all contracts.
Yeah.
The entire plant, which we see now, is paper. It's on the basis of paper, and it's a paper of financing papers. So coming from a background of investing from private equity, actually, I think gives you an edge in that part of it. Now, yes, I'm not an engineer. I know bits and bobs of engineering, but we work as a team, and you can bring that skill set into the mix.
Okay, so a lot of developers tend not to be shareholders in the project. They tend to just develop it and go on to the next project. Yeah. How did you end up maintaining your shareholding?
So, with a lot of grit, stubbornness, and to be fair, again, just drawing back on my experience. If you think about, remember what you have, your training, even if you're doing something a little bit differently. When we started to raise the money, unlike a number of other developers who may be just landowners or people who are not from the industry, I worked in investing. So when the guys were on the other side trying to invest in the business, I could think like them because I was them at one point in time. And all the tricks of the trade, all the things where you try to not necessarily screw over the other partner, but to maximize your side of the pie, I would be like, I smile and go, guys, come on. I've seen that before. I know exactly what you're trying to do. Yeah. And so, I mean, for instance, even when when we came the second time around, they changed the terms of our original agreement. The original agreement had them funding everything. And then I had basically a pre-agreed share of the development and also an ability to convert into equity. Second time around, this is now in 2015, like in the Matrix, to get the blue pill and the red pill, they basically gave me an option, saying, look, we're happy to fund, but we're going to really dilute you severely. Beyond, not even market, like really severely. Or you have a time frame by which you have to raise your own money. And if you're able to do that, then you eat what you kill, right? And being myself a little bit mad, and I will say a little bit cocky, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take the red pill. I'm going to run this one because I raised money from you. Why do you believe I can't raise money from somebody else? And so I went through that whole process. And in the end, I was successful in raising the capital. And I remember calling one of the gentlemen at Neoen to ask for their wire details. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah, I've raised the money. He's like, really? He's like, I didn't. And he was honest. To be fair to him, he said, you know what? Fair play. I didn't expect you could do it, but you did it. So well done. Congratulations.
So there's so many points where you could have said, this is just too hard. I can't. I'll just take the easy pill, not the hard pill. And you kept taking the hard pill. So I'm really proud of you and everything you've achieved. And building this massive 150-acre farm out in Westmoreland, in Jamaica, the country of your birth. Giving back in this way is just phenomenal.
Thank you. And I think just to add, thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for that acknowledgement, because when you're in that mix, in the up and down, because it's never a straight line, you tend to forget that. But I remember when we were having our hard moment, trying to just get things signed and negotiated, I remember thinking, you know what, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than solar. This is to encourage all the young Jamaican girls or any, developing country women to say, look, you can do something like this too, because she's done it, so why can't you do it? And that's been not just me, but my inspiration comes from people who've done that for me.
Yes.
Whether it's male or female, people of color, coming from a poor background, even my dad, to be able to see that something like that can be done really removes that ceiling or that doubt as to whether you can do it.
Right.
And I'm excited that someone else may come after me. Yeah. And hopefully my story has given them a little bit of inspiration.
And that just shows me the importance of having this vision that is pulling you through the hard times.
Yes.
This idea in your head of what you want to create, no matter what's happening and how hard it gets, if you hold on to that end vision, then you can make it through.
Exactly. And that's where that passion, that madness that we keep coming, we might make like a recurring theme. It's about that passion. It can't just be about trying to make money. If I was just about making money, I would probably just take it easier, stay at the bank, and just hope they didn't fire me. Just keep going until the roulette game ends. But I find when people tend to be able to come out of those depths of despair, it's when there's something a bit almost I don't want to say religious, but it's almost like there's this desire that you can't put out.
Yeah.
And you need it. It's not a want, it's not a desire. It's like, look, I actually need this for whatever reason it is for you.
Yeah. So now your solar plant is finished,
yes.
and you have now moved on to a new venture, just like a typical entrepreneur. You started a solar leasing company called Soleco Energy.
Yes.
So how did you transition from building one thing, your baby, saying goodbye to it, and building something else?
Right. So basically, I get bored fairly easily, and I like creation, and I enjoyed. Whilst there are maybe dark moments, I love what I do, and I recognize the privilege of being able to do what I do, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so what started to happen following the Paradise Park project was I started getting approached by. And now it was easier to raise money. I wouldn't say easy, but the first time super hard. The first time's the hardest, right? Because you don't have anything to show. And now I had people coming to me saying, hey, if you want to do something, we're happy to back you. And the industry was also moving. And I thought, wow, this is a future. This is where the industry may be moving in the future. Someone's going to do it. Yeah. It might not be me, but someone's going to do it. And if I don't do anything, it will definitely not be me. So why don't I give it a try, right? And I'm not going to sit there and not do anything. That's not my nature. So you worked your network again, raised money again, and have now launched Soleco Energy, which is a solar distribution. So it's a leasing model. So basically what we do is we finance solar installations for commercial and industrial clients. So whilst Paradise Park was a classic utility scale development, where it's large, we sell to the grid is our client. In this case, we are facilitating commercial and industrial companies to basically have their own solar and energy storage.
And it's going to operate not just in Jamaica, but throughout the region. Exactly.
So our goal right now, so again, it's like the entrepreneur, right? You've done one thing, so you want to move it to the next level. So we're looking at projects throughout the region, but I'd like to also move it not just Caribbean, maybe Central America, but I'd love to go back to Africa.
Yeah.
I think, and this model would really work for Africa, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? Again, as an entrepreneur, you think strategically, big picture, but you need tactics, right? And I think the game plan is play to your strengths, the market that you have a network, figure out the model, because the model yet hasn't been completely figured out. I think not just by us, but by anyone. The model that works, and then make it programmatic. Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. That's how you scale.
Yeah.
So we're now at the very beginnings, the high risk period where I may be also, hopefully I'll never end up on a couch again. I shouldn't, but which is a very, again, privileged position to be in. But you need to start with something that may fail, but you go with it and you give it all that you have.
All right. So on that note, thank you so much for sharing your journey, the highs and especially the lows, because people just see the success and they don't understand what is behind that success. And as your friend who was there the whole journey, I had to share that side of the story as well. You went through a divorce, you went through a failure.
And I forgot to add, my dad passed away.
Your dad passed away right in the middle of everything. Yes. Who was your beacon and your rock throughout this whole process, and that was very hard for you.
Absolutely.
And to see what you've been able to turn all those challenges into is phenomenal. People think that you go to Harvard and you go to Goldman and your life is set and you just have a salary and you're rich and that's it for the rest of your life. But for the people who come off that path, it's not set, it's not clear. Even though you have the privilege of an amazing education, you still experience failure, you still experience being broke, right?
Yes.
On the way to putting your vision out in the world.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. And thank you guys. And if you're interested in working with us, Soul Career Coaches, go to our website at soulcareer.com or send me a message on Instagram and I'll make sure to reply to you. Thanks. If you love this episode, remember to hit subscribe and leave us a review. And if you're a professional, executive, or entrepreneur that's interested in taking one of our coaching programs, head on over to soulcareer.com and sign up for a free consultation. We'd love to hear from you.